Hi, this is Jerry Usher reminding you to listen to Vocation Boom Radio, Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
I would have had no desire. Taste and see that the Lord is good.
Welcome to this radio video, and this is the review of the DX Patrol 100 kilohertz to 2 gigahertz SDR receiver. So for those that don't know what an SDR is, first of all, basically it's a radio's front end. It's the reception part of the radio, where the signal is received and treated and sent to the computer in a digital format, and the computer actually will do the rest of the handling with the piece of software that you are using. So this cost me about 94 Canadian dollars from eBay, and I'll tell you the quirks and quarks about it a little later on. If you want to see it, there's a page which is dxpatrol.pt, where you can actually view the converter and the radio itself. They have different products. One is a up converter if you already have a SDR dongle that actually receives VHF, UHF, and the up converter will add the shortwave capability. Or you can buy their receiver that you see here in the little box. It is a little more expensive than it was before. When I bought it, it was meant to become only on the circuit board, so I didn't have that little box enclosure here. But the seller changed its circuits and decided that he wanted to sell it in the little box all of the time. So now the only version you have is the boxed version, which I think is better anyway. And it's 79 euros. So you European guys out there, 79 euros, shipping included. That would amount to probably something like 100, 110 US dollars, maybe a little more. It's a very wideband receiver. It goes from 100 kilohertz in the medium, long wave, way up to 2 gigahertz. Performance on the shortwave portion, because this is a shortwave channel, so I'll focus on the 100 kilohertz to 30 megahertz part. There's a band switch here on the right. It is meant to change between the shortwave portion or the VHF UHF portion. As for the quick VHF UHF info, it does a job quite well of receiving VHF UHF signals. Seems to be very sensitive. So that's for the VHF UHF part, and if you want to have more on that, look at my VHF UHF channel, where I'll talk about the above 30 megahertz performance of this little device. So from 100 kilohertz to 30 megahertz in the shortwave spectrum, I'm actually very amazed at this little receiver. But the negative side is that you really need to learn the SDR Sharp software and how to tweak the different settings before you get what I call satisfactory reception. So at first it's a little difficult. You got to understand that there's an offset, because there's like an up converter that sends shortwave signals. So you have to put an offset of 40 megahertz in SDR Sharp. You got to understand all of those things. And the thing is, this receiver comes with no instruction manual at all. So if you're not a tech savvy person, you get this little box with nothing else. So you got to understand how it works and how to plug it. The good part is that the USB plug is a mini USB, which is a very, very standard plug. and you probably already have some cables lying around for this little receiver to plug into your USB port of your computer. It is a very, very nice receiver on shortwave. Like I said, you got to tweak and learn how to use it though, because if you want to really get the maximum out of this little thing. Now, sorry here for the wire, because I haven't installed my BNC, not BNC, my SMA plugs yet. That's something I'm going to do this weekend. So I've just put the wire, my coax, directly into the little hole here. Performance on shortwave is amazing, and when I say amazing, I am truly, truly, truly amazed at how this receiver is good on shortwave. And once you know how to set the RF gain right and everything, I must say that everything I receive on my ICOM ICR 8500 is received as well on this receiver. It accepts quite well my long wire in the backyard, which is nice because a lot of receivers tend to overload when I put my long wire. This one does overload, but you have the software where you get an RF gain that you can actually lower. So on some frequencies where there are a lot of strong signals, you lower the RF gain a little bit and you get basically great performance out of it. Now, because this is a SDR, and SDR means software defined radio, well, what you get is a computer that you need to plug it to. And the computer uses SDR Sharp as a free piece of software to actually use it. SDR Sharp. Now you see all these peaks. This is how this receiver works. You get the frequency at the top. You can enter a frequency. And the lower portion, I have the spectrum analyzer where you see all the signals. So you know that all these peaks actually are signals. So for example, if I click on, let's say here, 15610,
My son Andrew, which time was
WEWN. And it tells you everywhere there are signals where you can click. Of course, some signals are better than others. What's also nice is that you get the peaks. You see the peaks moving with propagation, which is already nice. Something quite amazing also that I've seen is ionospheric sweepers. You know, sometimes you're listening to a frequency and you hear that little whoop go through. It's these are ionospheric tests by the US Army and certain governments to check for optimum propagation. And what's amazing is you see them sweep across the display here. What's neat about the spectrum analyzer is that with a fast USB 2 port, you actually get a full 2 megahertz of spectrum. So if I close here, I get even a little more. As you see here, it starts at maybe something like 14,800 and goes all the way to 17,100, which is basically almost a 3 megahertz spectrum. So this is nice because you see a lot of signals and you can move that spectrum along and you have the frequencies at the bottom. So this is what makes an SDR receiver so amazing. It actually lets you, sorry about the glare here, I'm going to try to lower it if I can by putting this like this. Maybe it's going to be a little better. Sorry guys. So basically you get all these signals and you see all the frequencies, so you can see a big chunk of frequency at the same time. And it's nice because it actually helps you see signals pop up somewhere, and you can, if you're curious, you'll click on that new signal that you might see or something similar, which is nice. For example, here there's a little peak on 15 megahertz, and of course this is WWE, probably WWV time signal. The SDR Sharp software is not the easiest software to install, I must say, on the SDR though. One of the things that I would say is negative is, first of all, when you plug the USB cable of that little program, of that little box, sorry, what happens is that there's already a driver that wants to install, but that's not the driver that you want to use. So you need to tweak with the SDR Sharp. There's an install, and then there's a thing called something like I don't remember the name exactly, but it's like a ZIDAG or something like that. It's a little piece, you know, when you actually, if I click here, you see, okay, ZADIG here, and when you see ZADIG, that is a config of the driver, and you need to understand that you need to click on that thing and replace the existing driver with the driver that it wants to put in. That's how it can actually become an SDR receiver and tune any frequencies. So you need to have a minimum technical knowledge on computers to use this, and that's probably what the drawback of making this thing a little harder to use for the average you know, radio enthusiast. And if you're not very good with computers, you're gonna have probably a hard time installing this thing unless you ask for someone that actually knows what he's doing, and so on. Now, for performance throughout the band, I went from 100 kilohertz all the way to 30 megahertz. What I get is that 100, the long wave band, 100 kilohertz and up, is not very sensitive compared to, for example, if I want to tune the same signal on my ICOM SDR 500. So in a long wave, it's not super sensitive. In medium wave, it's an okay performer. I've heard some US stations last night coming in quite well. I've heard 1010 CFRB Toronto. I've heard, of course, local stations. Medium wave seems to be an okay performer. Maybe not up to par to, let's say, my ICOM receiver, but quite good. And where it really shines is the shortwave spectrum. All the way to 30 megahertz, you know, from 3 to 30 megahertz, it's an amazing performer. I was testing last night a few things, and I would almost say that this little box actually performs almost as well as my ICOM receiver. But the ICOM receiver is 2,000 bucks, and this thing costs $90, $100, you know, 79 euros. I mean, wow. If you're looking for an SDR and you are a little technical, buy the DX Patrol, but the complicated issue with the DX Patrol is this. When I bought it, the seller does not really talk much, so you can't, if you ask questions, you don't get any replies. You basically have a seller that gives you a tracking number 2 days after, so you think that they've already, you know, sent the item. But the problem is, it took this guy a month and a half before he actually mailed my SDR, and it was to a point where I actually had started a PayPal claim because I was thinking that, well, he's not sending it. And actually what's bad is that this seller, which had a 100% score when I bought the SDR, now has like an 89% score, and the latest, the 8 or 9 last comments are comments of people being pissed off and kind of not really happy because they haven't received their SDR. And you know, from what I see is that everyone will receive its SDR, but it seems to take a very long time before you can ship it. So I'm wondering if they are kind of made, you know, one by one or something like that, and it takes a long time to actually create them, and he has problem selling them to anyone in a quick pace. So that's probably the bad part of it. Yet would I buy another one? You know what, with the performance I get here, I'd be tempted to buy another one, but with the knowledge that I might not have it before 2 or 3 months. So if you're prepared to wait that long, wow, this is an amazing receiver. Of course, software for the receiver is free. It is called SDR Sharp, and works very well. It's a complex little piece of software though. If you need to use SDR Sharp, you'll have to learn how to master the SDR Sharp software, and especially tweak the settings. I had to tweak a lot of settings. You've got many settings here in the department for the RTL, including the RF gain that's right here, that you can up or down. So, you know, this is something you need to understand. You got to, you know, put the frequency correction to make sure that you tune precisely, that you'll have to play with it, understand the different bandwidths, and all the settings for the audio, the automatic gain control that you can use, and the FTT display, noise blanker, digital noise reduction stuff. You can record audio, frequency manager, which is kind of a spot where you can put your favorite frequencies and tune them, and so on and so on. You can of course zoom in, zoom out of the display. You have of course the spectrum analyzer on the top. You have that little waterfall here at the bottom, which shows you the different signals, which is nice. So when a signal pops on or off, you can see it appear on the waterfall easily. It's something in itself, and I actually was thinking that I'll do probably a series of videos on the SDR Sharp software once I understand more and more about it, and help you guys maybe that have SDRs use this software. Now the DX Patrol SDR receiver is actually can actually work apparently with other pieces of software, but I've downloaded 3 other software, and all 3 of them could not find the SDR. It doesn't seem to be compatible. So we'll wait and see. I'd like actually to have another piece of software, because I've seen a few of them that are actually real cool, including one that has a very nice S meter, and that's what's missing maybe here. I'd like to have an S meter when I tune a signal on the SDR Sharp, and that option doesn't seem to be available. The drawback, you need a computer for this little box to work, because 90% of all the signal gymnastics is done via a piece of software on a computer. So you need a computer, and when we say we need a computer, we also think about noise. Computers are very, very bad for noise. You know, like computers and shortwave radio don't go well together usually. Now, when I run my laptop off batteries, it's actually very quiet. I'm very, very surprised at that. When I put the power supply, it's a little noisier, but it's still usable. But it is much better when I put it on batteries though, because it's much quieter. And what's nice is if you have a laptop computer, you can actually DX with this little box and go into a DX expedition. Just bring along your laptop and batteries, and you know, DX whatever you want. And this is a nice add-on if you have a laptop. If you're the kind of person that's not going to use it anywhere else, well, my suggestion would probably be to use a little desktop computer with a screen and just plug it in there. Make sure you have a shielded coax that goes to the radio, and so on. so that you don't have too much interference going into it. And you know, just DX your way around. And I believe that with the good settings in SDR Sharp, this little box can actually do some real DX. And an example is last night I was listening to, before going to bed, I was listening to Radio New Zealand on 15720, which is one of my favorites, you know, before going to bed. And at 0400 we have that little Russian number station popping up every night on 15721, just 1 kilohertz higher. So I actually took the bandwidth of the receiver here, the bandwidth, changed it to a very small bandwidth, put it in upper sideband, and actually went on 15721, and I could actually listen to the number station, which was very weak, but was coming in, and I could hear it on my receiver. So it gives you an idea that this is a DX machine. It is something that you can use as a main receiver. And if you already have a computer, what's nice is that for $100 you will get the best damn receiver you can have for $100. And I mean, this beats everything below 1,000. I can tell you that. This is an amazing little thing, and wow, I'm still very surprised at performance out of this. And because you can tweak everything in the software, this is also something that adds to the DX capability, because you can just fine-tune everything to have the maximum, the best sound quality and everything. Now, to have a good sound quality, I've actually plugged my a pair of speakers that I have on my laptop, because my laptop, my Toshiba laptop, has really bad audio all around. You know, I can't listen to a YouTube music with just the speakers of the laptop. It's really horrible. So either pair of earphones on your laptop or outboard speakers, computer speakers will do fine. And you'll have good audio. You'll be able to listen to all the stations. And if you have a really powerful machine, like I got a Core i5 here, well, it's multitasking. You go on the web, you do whatever you want. And actually I was thinking of adding my second screen. For one big reason is that I could leave the SDR software running on my screen while I'm doing something else with the laptop. Of course, if you use a laptop, the drawback is that you always need that USB port to plug in the little device. So just remember that there are wires going to be plugged onto your laptop all the time, so it's a little harder to move around. The little box itself, if we just take a peek, I'm just gonna unplug here everything. Here we go. So you get basically this band switch here where you go UHF, VHF, and HF, depending on what you're listening to. You get your two inputs. One input is for the VHF, UHF signals, and the second one separate for HF. These are SMA connectors, so you need to have very small SMA connectors. Some people might already have some of these cables. SMA connectors are pretty much the same connectors that you have in the back of routers. A lot of routers use SMA connectors to put the little antennas. So I actually was thinking that maybe a little router antenna for VHF, UHF might be interesting. And you get your USB port. This is for connection with the computer, and also it draws the power from the computer, so you don't have to plug in an outboard any outboard power supply on this thing. It does get its power off the computer, so that's also something very nice. There's a little LED light that lets you know that it's working, and it changes color depending on your VHF, UHF, or HF band. A little something that I'm a little scared of is it was like that last night. After you use it for many hours, it really runs hot, and I mean hot to a point that it actually is something that I'm worrying about for the electronics inside the box. I'm wondering if it's well, you know, this is a plastic box. Plastic box is not the best because, you know, it keeps the heat inside the little box instead of, you know, radiating the heat outside. So I'm wondering if, you know, it's gonna run like that for many years, or if it could, you know, fail because of the heat, because it really comes hot, and like I said, that's something that I'm a little scared of. So maybe I was thinking of maybe, you know, actually opening the little box and trying to maybe add some kind of heat sink to this device to help heat get off a little more. So that's probably something that I'm a little scared of. And so frequency coverage is amazing. 100 kilohertz to 2 gigahertz. It's basically the same coverage that I have on my Acom ICR 8500. And that radio costs $2,000 bucks. So it gives you an idea that this is amazing, and it's done right. Cool. So if you want to have an all mode receiver, because this thing receives all modes, USB, LSB, AM, wide FM, narrow FM, it has CW, DSB, raw, and with the plugin and the Dream software, you can actually decode DRM on this receiver, and actually that's one of the things I want to try in the next week or two. So look for a DRM reception of something, because you all you need is the Dream software, which is a free piece of software, and you need a little plugin that actually, it's like a driver that takes the audio and makes the Dream software capable of picking up that audio from your little device with SDR Sharp. So amazing device. For 79 euros, this is one of the best receivers you can ever have, as long as you don't mind using a computer to tune around. So the minimum requirements for those that actually want to use it, I would say that this receiver probably does not work well if you don't have at least a dual core machine. I have an i5 and already takes like 20% of the CPU. So it gives you an idea that this thing does draw a lot of CPU power out of a computer. It's mainly this SDR Sharp software, because, you know, with the scope and everything. Of course, if you turn off the scope, if you turn off the waterfall and stuff like that on SDR Sharp, it's true that it probably will help a lot in the performance. The problem is that what's cool about reception on SDR Sharp is the fact that you have a waterfall and you have your spectrum analyzer. So really amazing. So that's what I think of this device. Amazing. The best $100 radio I've ever bought. That I can tell you. And it's actually so amazing that I was thinking last night that I might use my 8500 a little less now, because I'm getting used to this software and I'm actually enjoying this thing a lot. So dxpatrol.pt for Portugal. That's where you can get more information and buy it. They accept credit cards and PayPal. I would recommend buying it through PayPal, because if you don't have the device, then you can go through the PayPal and claim your money. Of course, if you buy with a credit card and you don't get your stuff, you can also call your credit card company and say, hey, I bought this stuff on this date and I want to have my money back. And they'll just refund your device. But I think everybody receives its SDR when they buy it from him. It's just that it can take 2-3 months before you get it, and that's the bad part. And it's unfortunate because if this guy had them a little more in stock, actually this would be nice, you know, you could buy it and after a week or two you'd have it. So that's what I think of this DX Patrol SDR receiver. If you enjoy our videos, well, why not subscribe to our Shortwave channel, and you'll be informed when new videos are online. And hope you guys and girls enjoy my videos. And of course, you probably will see a lot of other videos with this SDR receiver in the coming weeks, because I'll be probably using this pretty much as my main receiver for the next weeks, that's for sure. So thanks for watching. 73.